Hello, my name is Chris Blask. I'm the Vice President of Strategy with Cybeats and with Mehdi Entezari today for episode 42 of Cybeats Powerhouse Perspectives. So I think by definition, we have the answer to life, the universe, and everything in today's show. So Mehdi, good to see you. How are you doing?
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here. Mehdi Entezari. I am part of the innovation team at Unisys, and my job is basically identify problems that can be solved with emerging technologies. And glad to be here.
And for background, Mehdi, actually maybe I'll learn something on today's show. So you had that blockchain and security standing call. It was bi-weekly, I think, right? And it was running for a long time, right? A year or two or something, right?
Right.
And there was May of 2019, I think it was. I was in Key West at my brother's wood shop sitting on a stool. And it was just you and I on that call. And we got into a rant. And now we have DBoM, right? And it's, since I said the word blockchain in the beginning of that, DBoM isn't about blockchain. It's just what instigated the conversation, right?
Oh, yeah. That was like when you were saying, oh, these operations, they have no idea what they have in their operation. And they would like to have a bill of material that they get from all of their suppliers, not just one, so that they know what they have. And they said, oh, that is interesting. That's transparency into the supply chain. And blockchain is one way to solve it. But then, we went and architected a solution by which blockchain could also be used, but it wasn't the only way to provide transparency into the supply chain.
Right. And so DBoM.io is up now. The DBoM project of the Alliance Foundation was launched last week. We got the press releases out after 4 years of work. And I find it interesting, even in the context of these conversations, having for Cybeats with folks like you, right? Where are we along this line? And, SBOM sharing right now, the presentation this Monday in the CISA SBOM sharing group, that you and Ameth and I and some other game, trying to figure out how all this stuff goes together. And I think it's particularly apt to the sort of theme we've developed with this series, transparency, taking folks like yourself with a great deal of experience, individual interesting perspectives, and looking all the way back from the beginning. How has it changed to get where we are? And given where we are, what do we think is going to go? Where do we think it's going to go in the future? And a lot of my opinions are frankly based on what you and I and Ryan and Ameth and Sanket and others have done with DBoM. Because I think the whole lineage lines us up to have to do certain things. This transparency is more efficient and effective and cost effective and competitive, and the Darwinistic forces of markets drive us down these paths. So before I get into that whole rant, Anthony, if you roll the first question. So what I found out when I worked at Unisys is it's the oldest computer company on earth. It's 140 years old. You go all the way back to Burroughs in the late 1800s and literary gears and so forth. And you've been there your entire career. Since what year did you start?
1984.
1984, right?
Yeah.
And, so jokingly a little bit, because the era before that was literally gears and spindles, the technology and the information systems that Burroughs and the other, ancestors of Unisys developed started with cash registers, turned math into analog systems. The digital era came along. You joined. Grace Hopper. Was Grace Hopper involved anywhere in your career?
No.
At the same time or in the same company or anything?
No. Not that I know.
But it's just it's overlapping. You see what I mean? So looking back in your career at the beginning, was it easier to have clarity, transparency, whether positive or negatives, and how we followed that path to the pseudo present?
Well, when I started in 1984, internet was not there. So cybersecurity attacks were not an issue back then. But as devices start to get connected, slowly security issues started to become an issue. But the whole transparency for decades, it was just basically what you got from your suppliers. You had a trust with your suppliers, different levels of trust depending on who your supplier was. And some areas like huge operations, a lot of times they were blind about what they had what the supplier had provided them. You could get a hardware, you just got a package, you got a system. You didn't know what's in it. And there were major issues back then, but slowly throughout the years, it became more important to know what you have, whether it's in your system, hardware, or whether it's components in the solution that you're receiving from your supplier. Because of these attacks that started to slowly to show up, because of the new government regulations, it became more important to not use products that are using components that they're not supposed to. And on the other side, even as a supplier, before you just provided a system or software to your customer, and you had, at least from a Unisys point of view, they had a good visibility into who their customers were. So there were a relationship between them and their customers. And but that started as companies went global. Then the products start to be distributed around the globe. Still, companies like Unisys have visibility into who their customers are. But again, it is important to know from a Unisys point of view, government regulations, who are the end users of their system. So it's just like a slow transition from, nobody cares, to, it is very important in many aspects. It's not just one or two.
Well, it's interesting. I'm thinking about this. In 1984, I was working at Photo Engravers and Electrotypers Limited in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, which was the sole printing house for the Sears catalog in Canada. So we made all the Sears catalogs. I was running the baling room, turning mountains into molehills, and worked there long enough to see the whole thing. So, and bill of materials, the inputs into the plant came on rail cars and trucks. And there are inks and dyes and glues and paper and so forth. And they came with bills of material, this actual piece of paper. It says where it came from, what's on the train, what's in the box, and so on and so forth. And you so many things you just said touched on, and I see it all the time. And in the present, we're talking about all the supply chain security stuff. I have these same sort of feelings in my head. It's like back in those days, the attestation, the bill of materials, and the rail car said this is from this source and has this stuff on it, and you believe that because it kind of looked like that, and it's a rail car and somebody had to send it there, right? It's just implicit trust in the relationship. Mm-hmm. And in the present, and roll the second question if you wouldn't mind, Anthony. I keep coming back to this. I think open source attestation ecosystems of channels and nodes or something like that, which is how you can describe DBoM, kind of save the world, right? And it's an incremental thing, because you look at those relationships between photo engravers and Sears Canada and the relation and the suppliers of paper and inks and so forth, and you realize that a lot of business has always been running on implicit trust. Somebody somewhere signed a contract, the employees are just doing what they think is right, but nobody's actually checking and not writing it down, right? It's not being tracked along the way. And as you say, we're in this world with connected systems and hacking and security needs. So we have to have a way to instantiate those existing relationships, the processes that have worked for thousands of years, and just put the transparency in it so it can't be corrupted immediately.
Yeah. I mean, the way I look at it is, in the past, companies had that trust, correct? So I trust my supplier of software that they're gonna, if there are any types of vulnerabilities, they're gonna take care of it, and then they're gonna let me know, and they're gonna provide the software. And then the suppliers, in many cases, they took their time to address the vulnerabilities because, the customer doesn't know much about it. We are working on it depending on available resources. So, and that dynamic started to change, especially with Log4j. When that happened, I can't wait for my supplier to tell me, that, whether they're going to provide something, whether they're affected or not by the vulnerability. Is it exploitable? And then they're going to let me know. You needed to know right away whether any of the software that you're using from them are affected. So that's where I think that was the tipping point by which the consumers of solutions, products want to know right away, does the supplier, are they aware of it? Are they working on it? Is there a way to mitigate it if they're affected by it? And that's where I think also, in my opinion, we realize, I mean, you and I, that DBoM, DBoM or a solution similar to that is needed, by which provides that transparency, but the transparency is under control. It's not like I provide you with all the information that you ask for. It's based on some form of a NDA or disclosure agreement, as you refer to.
Well, let's geek out on that for a second. This is part of some interesting conversations just today, right? I see ultimately in this attested ecosystem world, the contracts that are just enunciating the business relationships that, again, have been there forever, become the policy, right? Because right now you look at how you're doing intellectual property control, mostly based on hope, right? And as sort of implicit, probably, unanalyzed trust in human nature and people wanting to keep their jobs, and being reluctant to share intellectual property in as much as they realize they're in that sort of situation on average most of the time, when really the contract said, we won't share this information outside of these bounds. Well, if that contract was a smart contract being read by an oracle and part of your active business processes, then you can instrument in all the actions around that information and just know, right? Not spend all that time either forensically trying to figure out who touched the information before it leaked and yada, 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 or missing the opportunity cost of doing things because that's somewhere in this fuzzy area of risk, right? One of your comments really keep me up to think about that, because so much is, we believe that we're operating in a trusted environment. We never were, it's functional, it works, but no, we're just coasting along. And the other one, we're avoiding opportunities because of fear. Fear of intellectual property sharing has hindered security. This whole threat intelligence cycle 20 years ago, right? Oh, we can't share threat intelligence for the same reason we can't share supply chain intelligence. Well, you can. So, that last question, if you wouldn't mind, Anthony, what was it again? Can we just make this go away? Right? In the agreement, we're talking about this. I can't exactly remember what I was thinking about when I wrote this question, but I think it was that first DBoM call, where it's just what I see is in just that particular case, if a Unisys customer said, hey, who touched this, server before you put it in the rack, you could find out eventually with an enormous amount of work and literally months of investigators and interviews and so on and so forth, or we could just build it in so you'd know, right? And I kind of think that's where we're going with all of this. Like currently in this era of supply chain intelligence, and I think DBoM is actually a part of that. But what do you think? Are the evolutionary drivers driving us down that path where we can make?
Yeah, I think there's a need. Definitely, there's a need to know from a consumers of the products, because in cases like Log4j, they really cannot wait. So they need to know now, today, right now, whether they're affected or not. So that's where some may require even getting the composition of their software through SBOMs as part of their contract, because they need to also know where what are the sources of those components, whether it's a hardware or software. And as you said, with respect to manufacturing, production, build, what are all the components that were involved in production or building the software? I mean, these are becoming more and more necessary. The knowledge, the knowing about them becomes more and more necessary. So I think it's not going to go away, at least the need for DBoM, but it's going to be a slow transition. Companies need to start to feel comfortable. They have to build that relationship with their suppliers and the customers, by which what they're going to share, how they're going to share, and on what set of policies they're going to share. So they have to become more transparent because the market requires that. And but initially, it's going to be a slow process until it becomes established. And suddenly, oh, that's a normal thing. What do you want to do? You want to provide the information, or you do it through DBoM or something similar to that. Right. And also, automation becomes important too, because now I want, as a consumer of all the products that I use, components that I use in my operation, I want transparency. I want to know what's in it, but you can't allocate resources to analyze that information. So automation becomes an important part of the whole process, and the system, the network, the ecosystem that connects these endpoints has to provide a way of automating the whole process. Humans cannot be involved in the normal operation. It's when it becomes critical, something has to be, attention has to be paid to something, then it becomes humans can become, involved.
Right. Yeah. And I've, the last couple of years I've been using a phrase, I got quoted in a podcast, they clipped it. So it's, used it as a clip. So it's a interesting conversation to debate about it. But I think it's the last decade of cybersecurity. And what I mean is it's the last decade where we're going to come, realize we've missed an entire field of practice. Mm-hmm. Right. I think it'll be, for the record, if you're young and you want to get into cybersecurity, you can have a lifelong career. This is never going away. Conflict is a thing. It's complicated.
And ChatGPT is not going to replace it.
Right. But I think a lot of the things, particularly with you and the DBoM team, thinking it through the last couple of years, I think a lot of the attack surface goes away, right? Because so many exploits, so many breaches, so many compromised states. You look at the individual artifact or whatever it is, and not just today, but for my entire career, it's like anybody could have broken that because it's just So I think we're reaching the point where you actually have to have some skills. You shouldn't just be able to walk up red teams. I don't know if I ever asked you this. But most security people I know have done this. I've done it. The physical red teaming sort of thing, at least just for fun, just walking in the wrong door of a secure facility, just tailgating somebody else. Yeah, it's so easy. It's always been so easy to break things by cyber means. That can't be the steady state forever. Mm-hmm. I think it's just missing a lot of stuff. But anyways, but I'm soapboxing and I have enough opinions anyways. Any last thoughts? So you seem to be as optimistic as I am that this goes in the right direction. Do you think people are doing enough today? Any standing concerns?
Based on what we see or I see, I think slowly companies are becoming familiar with the need. And I guess, I know that the first thing they're going to want to do is proof of concepts. And that's what we see. Let us show the value. So they're going to go through the whole process and then slowly realize what they can get out of it or how the whole concept of DBoM can be improved to fit their needs. As the whole technology evolves, the requirements evolve. So I think if it's not DBoM, it's going to be something very similar to DBoM because it can't have a centralized solution. It has to be decentralized. It has to be able to scale. It has to, there has to be that that policy-based sharing. It can be ad hoc. I'm very optimistic. I think it's just a matter of time. Yeah. And by the way, like DBoM, we always talk about the cybersecurity. It's not just about cybersecurity. It could be about the ESG data. What are your carbon footprints? So you want to provide that type of information to the consumer of your products. It has to be automated, that sharing. And in some cases, it has to be also policy-based because you may not want to reveal to the universe who you are getting your components from, so that you're using in your solution. So again, there are many different use cases of DBoM in different areas. Anywhere that in supply chain that you need transparency in place and trust.
And trust, which is pretty well everywhere as far as I can tell. Well, on that note, thank you very much, for your time today sharing the world.
Thanks for inviting me and nice talking to you folks. Thanks.
Thanks, folks.